All right, imagine a church with 100 people in it. Now picture 16 of them just quietly getting up and walking out. No big scene, no drama, just a slow, silent exit. Well, that's pretty much a picture of what happened to American Christianity over the last decade and a half. So let's dig into the data and really try to figure out what's going on with this deconversion crisis.
But here's the really fascinating part of the puzzle. This isn't happening to every church. Not at all. While some are in what looks like a total freefall, others are doing just fine. Some are even growing. So what's the deal? What's the difference? The data points to a really powerful and maybe even surprising reason why. Let's get into the numbers.
So, we're going to start with a story that's told by the numbers, a real tale of two very, very different declines. And this is where the story gets super interesting. Just look at the huge difference here. Now, just so we're on the same page, mainline usually means the older, more historically liberal denominations, and evangelical tends to point to the more conservative ones. According to the General Social Survey, between the 70s and the 2010s, faith retention for mainline Protestants just collapsed, dropping by over 18%. For evangelicals, it was a much smaller dip, just 6.6%. You guys, this isn't a small difference. It is a massive, massive split. And this donut chart does a great job of showing the actual flow of people. For mainline churches, for every one person that walks in the front door, you've got almost two walking out the back. It's a constant net loss. But then you look at the evangelical numbers. They're actually seeing a net gain. For every person who leaves, 1.2 people are joining. So you have one group that's shrinking and another that's growing. The big question is, why? And to really drive this home, some of those individual mainline denominations have seen just catastrophic losses. I mean, since the late 1980s, the Presbyterian Church USA, the PCUSA, has lost up to 52% of its members. 52%. That is more than half the church, just gone in a single generation. But here's the twist in the story. Decline is not the whole picture. Let's look at another Presbyterian group, the PCA, which is way more theologically conservative. During that same period of massive mainline decline, they grew by almost 15%. Okay, so same tradition, totally different results. That tells us right there that the issue isn't the name on the sign out front. It's something else that's happening on the inside. Okay, so we've seen the what, this huge divergence in who's staying and who's going. Now let's dive into the why. The research points to this really interesting idea, the creation of what you could call the overmatched believer. So what exactly is an overmatched believer? Well, it's someone who grows up with a faith that's totally sincere, but it's kind of shallow, you know? They learn the basic stories, the simple stuff, but they never really get equipped to handle the tough questions that they are absolutely going to face in college or online or just from their skeptical friends. So when a real, serious challenge comes along, their whole faith framework just falls apart. The author J.T. English just nails it with this quote. For years, the big fear in a lot of churches was asking too much of people. But what the data is showing is that the real problem was the complete opposite. People aren't leaving because the faith is too demanding. They're leaving because it's not substantial enough. We haven't given them a faith that's deep enough to be worth holding on to. And this isn't just a problem on one side of the fence either. This kind of shallowness can show up in different ways. On one hand, you've got these really rigid, anti-intellectual environments where asking a tough question is seen as a threat. But on the other hand, you can have this very thin, therapeutic kind of faith that's all about making you feel good, and it totally ignores the hard, central truths. Both of these, in their own way, completely fail to build a faith that can actually last. So, if a shallow faith is the problem, what's the solution? Well, the data also gives us a really clear picture of what it takes to build a faith that sticks around for the long haul. The Fuller Youth Institute did this huge study called Sticky Faith, and they found something pretty crucial. It turns out the biggest predictor of a young person's faith surviving through college wasn't how awesome their youth group was. In fact, somewhere between 40 and 50% of youth group grads just drift away. The real game changer was intergenerational connection. Worshiping with adults and having at least 5 adult mentors who are actually investing in their lives. And what about all those tough intellectual questions we talked about? Well, research shows that apologetics training, which is basically learning the reasons and evidence for your faith, doesn't create doubt. It does the exact opposite. When students get real answers to their real questions, they become more confident, more certain. They've been, in a way, inoculated against challenges they're going to face down the road. This is not a new idea. For centuries, the church had a process called catechesis. It was a really structured, systematic way of teaching the core beliefs. It wasn't just about feelings. It involved deep instruction, memorization of key ideas, and a formal commitment. It was designed from the ground up to build a deep, resilient, and really well-understood faith.
So, when you put all this data together, all these studies, it all points to one single, powerful conclusion. When it comes to whether a faith sticks or not, depth is the difference. So if we look back at those churches that are actually growing, the ones with high retention rates, what are they doing differently? What does this depth actually look like in the real world?
Well, it really seems to come down to 4 key things. They use systematic teaching, like catechesis, to build a whole coherent worldview. They use apologetics to prepare people for objections. They make sure worship happens across generations to embed that faith in a real community. And they create a culture where it's okay to have doubts and ask questions honestly, which keeps a small question from turning into a huge faith-destroying crisis.
So here's the most important takeaway from all of this. The dividing line for whether churches grow or decline, it's not really about being theologically conservative or liberal. The data shows the real fault line is between deep and shallow. The churches that challenge their members with deep teaching and deep theology and deep community, those are the ones that are thriving. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. For years and years, the big conversation was about making church more relevant, to try and keep people from leaving. But maybe that was the wrong goal the whole time. The data strongly suggests the true antidote to deconversion isn't relevance, it's resilience, a faith that's built deep enough to actually withstand the storms.